Okay, now we've got all of the wannabe gurus basically just reading what they've read on the Daily Mail in a TikTok video out of the way. I can do a video on yesterday's budget after reading the released papers. And also talk about how I think it's going to affect property investors, entrepreneurs, wealthy business travelers, and everyone in between. What I'm not going to do is just read you off of the script exactly what was said, because you can go and find that anywhere. First of all, starting with the light-hearted stuff, fucking increasing taxes on business class travel or first class travel is just a joke. 70% of travellers who fly economy aren't going to be affected, but effectively there's going to be more taxes on those upgrades or on those more expensive flights than there are today. The already heavily taxed sector, much higher tax is charged than any other country in the world. So if you're using air miles to upgrade your flights, you will know that when you use your air miles, you have to pay the additional taxes. They're going to be a bit higher. But really, this video is for the property investors and what yesterday's budget will mean for us moving forward. So one of the unsung headlines, which was in the detail, was an additional fund to go in towards combating the nutrient issue. This round two, they're calling it, of additional funding will hopefully mean more people who have planning applications stuck in the system awaiting some sort of mitigation measure from their local government should see things starting to move. But if you're like me, and I've done another video on this, I've got to upload it, you will start to try and find ways around this nutrient issue. And I'll give you two examples that I've recently changed the applications on just to get the things through the planning system. But the other three headlines were effectively the changes to multiple dwelling relief or getting rid of it altogether, the changes to holiday lets in your personal name, and if that was a shock, you're a fucking idiot, and then the reduction on the capital gains higher tax threshold when you sell a property that hasn't been your prime residence. First of all, dealing with multiple dwelling relief. Now, over the last few years, 2 to 3 years, that's become quite a popular thing with people buying HMOs. That was an abuse of the system. It wasn't ever going to stand up, and some of those grey areas has meant that that has just been shut off completely. But multiple dwelling relief, I've really only used it on one larger transaction, where we were buying 10 properties from one housing association, all on the same road. It was a linked transaction, same buyers, same sellers, same properties. So there was no way around it. And the saving is that instead of all of the stamp duty being calculated on the total transaction value, we could divide the value by how many properties there were, 10, which meant that we paid stamp duty on the individual properties. That saved us about 60k on that transaction. That's going to be completely scrapped. But really, does that make a huge difference? Half intelligent property investor, you've been buying properties in a company for the last few years. Definitely since 2015. That means the majority of portfolios now where there could be a linked transaction are owned by a company. Well, you don't pay stamp duty on the property value, you pay stamp duty on the company value, which is 0.5%. So anyone with half a fucking brain would have been buying properties, building a portfolio in a company. Selling that company means it only triggers 0.5% stamp duty. So I think this is a great thing to bring in because it's not even relevant for the entrepreneurial property investors. It's only relevant for when you're buying large portfolios from older school landlords or from housing associations. But there are ways that you can link it into a transaction of a company to pay the lower stamp duty rate, which you should have been doing anyway, because no matter which way you cut it, linked transaction, multiple dwelling relief, stamp duty, commercial rates, corporation stamp duty at 0.5% is by far a million times better. So this isn't a major issue for property investors. The other thing that was announced is the interest rate relief for holiday lets. So basically in 2015, interest rates on buy-to-lets in your personal name wasn't 100% allowable if you went into the higher tax bracket with your gross rental income. This basically means you're not taxed on profit, you're taxed on turnover in a roundabout way. But there was a little loophole for holiday lets because holiday letting was considered a trade. It meant that this loophole allowed you to deduct the cost of borrowing, the interest, the mortgage, 100%, unlike private landlords. Again, 2015, we're talking about 9 years ago. If you haven't been buying in a limited company, you haven't been gearing up for this to be coming because it was slap bang in your face 9 years ago, then you need your fucking head tested. And the other thing, service accommodation, holiday let individuals will understand is that they can incorporate their business tomorrow anyway and transact all of the holiday bookings within that trade and entity. Which brings me nicely on to the third point, which if you're selling these assets that you've owned for some time, you're no longer going to pay 28%, you're going to pay 24%. It's a really nice step towards selling those properties. Is it a game changer? Absolutely not. We're going to see loads of people all of a sudden offload their properties because they're going to save 4%. Are we bollocks? This is not a stimulant to drive and increase property transactions. There's going to be more measures brought in just before the general election, which is going to be November. Forget the hype. It's not going to be May. They're going to squeeze in another announcement, maybe not another budget, to stimulate the property market, because 4% on second homes, which are classed as assets and not trades, isn't going to set the world on fire. I've got a couple of properties on the market which are in my personal name that I was prepared to pay 28% capital gains tax on, and now I'm just going to pay 4% less. So it's good for me, but it's not a game changer, and it's not going to drive my behavior at all. And if 4% tax does drive your behavior, you're in the wrong fucking business. And then two final things to finish on is that, one, the announcement that every fucking wannabe guru jumped on in the last budget, which was that you're going to be able to convert a house into 2 flats under permitted development. There was no mention of that. And it's because it was under consultation, and we still haven't got the results of that consultation. It's probably going to come in, but shouldn't be all over something until you are given a start date. And the last thing is this non-dom status. Now, this is a vote winner legislation. So this is to try and combat some of the negativity that Rishi has come under through his wife having the same status. But they're going to offer something alternative. They haven't released the details about it. Now, if you want my opinion, and I have no prior knowledge, I've done no more research into it, but there is a leaky hole in this country. We are bleeding from the seams of young, talented entrepreneurial people and multi-millionaires leaving this country to go to places like Dubai. If you want my opinion, they are going to remove non-dom to bring something in which will try and stop this leak of our talent, because if it continues in the next 10 to 15 years, all you're going to have in this country are local councillors and people who claim benefits.